Hello, everyone. My name is John Euler. This is Journey to Healing. We're doing a deep dive into the subject of boundaries, and we are going to find out how to implement boundaries now. When is that appropriate? Before we do that, I want to let you know you can visit SurvivorSupport.net and visit the podcast tab and look at previous podcasts. That will actually set the stage for what we are now going to talk about. How to implement boundaries. In my estimation, for those that seek out counseling, and for those that don't, that actually should, the vast majority of people that seek out counseling, whether they're aware of it or not, the majority of their problems can be found or located in their relationships, in certain kind of relationships, where they are having a difficult time being honest, or they're still holding out hope for a certain person in their life that may own what they should have owned a long time ago, but it's typically they have somebody in their life in the here and now that they're not being honest with. That can become a very practical thing. That should be one of the goals of therapy, meaning I can go through counseling for months and months and months, but if it doesn't make a difference in the here and now, then what good is it? So it should be doing two things. I should be experiencing more peace and more rest on the inside. I should know myself more. What difference does that make? Because then I will know how to manage myself. I'll know what goals I have. I'll know whether or not things are beyond my control, and so I'm not trying to control the things I don't have control over. That has to do with other people, by the way, which we're going to look at now. So there's a number of things that counseling should do, but one thing more than anything is it should make a difference in my relationships, how I act toward others and how I permit them to act towards me. So inevitably, it should change my boundaries. So if you're in counseling, your therapist should at some point in time be talking to you about that. If you haven't gone to counseling, that should be one of the things that your therapist feels very strongly about in helping you deal with and really speak truth, speak honestly in your current relationships. So we've set the stage for the first half of the program. We were setting the stage for really dispelling any doubt between kind of average level selfishness, which I still don't think we should tolerate. We should always be raising the bar, versus malignant grade or professional grade selfishness. The New Testament, Jesus called those pigs. Peter called those pigs. Paul called them fools. Solomon calls those fools. So pigs and fools and even dogs, that was the term. Those inside and outside the home, we need to make sure that we have relationships that are beneficial. If they've become black holes, we have to begin to attend to this. Eventually, we're coming up to the holidays, and the question is, are you looking forward to those? Or are you feeling obligated to be around people that are not healthy for you? The term dysfunctional means it's not working very well. A good working definition of dysfunctional, so a dysfunctional family, is one that is tension reducing. You've got to bring the tension down. It's tension reducing, but never tension resolving. It just it gets swept under the carpet to become a landmine, and now everybody tippy-toes around it, walking on eggshells, lest somebody step on that thing and all hell breaks loose. That's a dysfunctional family. That is really coddling a pig, quite frankly. So once we become clear that we need to implement boundaries, that we have the right, that we, for everybody's sake, meaning who's on the receiving end of the selfish person, now we're going to begin to implement them. So what kind of boundaries are needed? Well, there's a gradation of boundaries. Again, a boundary is a limit. Boundaries reflect reality and make the invisible visible. So if there's disrespect going on, and that's really what's happening, when somebody's crossing your boundaries, they are devaluing you, They are not appreciating you, so they are depreciating, and they're devaluing you. So oftentimes that's invisible. That has to do with on an emotional level. That can take the form of sarcasm, but this is sarcasm with a point, very pointed stuff. Okay, so what do boundaries do? Boundaries and limits are the same thing. They begin to place limits on the person to where the injury or the stealing, so stealing of time, effort, energy, resources, taking your pearls, it's going to stop. Why? Because it's draining you. You are a steward of those things that God has given to you, including your kids. If you get wound up because somebody is winding you up, if you are being drained by someone, if you're being emotionally harmed by someone, you know you're no good to those kids. Why? Because now you're tied up in knots. It's going to be time to implement boundaries. Boundaries are implemented incrementally. Okay? But again, boundaries reflect reality and they make the invisible visible. We're familiar with some boundaries, for instance, a marriage ceremony. A marriage ceremony, this may sound funny, but kind of get the feel of this. What does a marriage ceremony do? It suddenly means there's a boundary around that couple. They aren't free to come and go, so to speak, in terms of finding other partners or other partners finding them. So it's exclusive. That's also what a wedding ring does. So a wedding ring is symbolic of a symbolic rite or ritual that somebody went through that makes a difference. So if you are married and you're not wearing your wedding ring, I always challenge people to wear their wedding rings. If somebody doesn't value their wedding ring, to each their own, but I tell you, I always say that's not a good sign. You should be proud of your wedding ring. If you don't actually like the physical ring, hopefully you can get it done, but you should be proud to wear it, because if you're not wearing it, well, okay, moving along. How about parental rights? Okay, there's a boundary. It's invisible, but why do societies recognize parental rights? What do we see being encroached upon by the trans movement? Parental rights are being overridden. We also see that with all the shots going on, the medical stuff. There's something sacred about parental rights. Nobody can just or should be able to just encroach upon you. They can't give your child an aspirin at school, but now they can take kids off for abortions and now sex change therapy, cross-sex hormones or puberty blockers. But parental rights are there, and we don't have to earn them. They're granted to us because there is a boundary between us and the rest of society with our kids. We are the guardian of our kids. Property rights. We understand that. It differentiates and it's a demarcation of what is or isn't ours and what we have the right to have dominion over. And I don't mean that in a weird sense, but meaning it's ours. So trespassing presupposes private property. The reason why somebody just can't come up to your child and do something is because your child is yours. You go to the doctor and you have to sign in agreement. So parental rights, property rights, human rights, the Declaration of Independence. We know that people around the world should be treated properly. We have an intuitive sense of that, and also personal rights. So human rights on a global sense, but personal rights. So boundaries reflect reality. People are important. That's why we all have certain rights. And boundaries define and clarify roles and expectations. Okay? So who has the authority to exercise their discretion in a certain manner and act upon their preference? Meaning, you may think it's your home, but what happens if I think it's your home? Well, whose opinion matters? Well, the police will help. But why can you call the police? As a matter of fact, why can't I pick up the phone and have you evicted from your home and say you're trespassing because you own your home? You are the one that has dominion over that. I'm the trespasser. So there really is something real. Okay, so boundaries define and clarify roles. They clarify ownership as well. Okay, possessiveness, meaning you possess you. Nobody has the right to you. And they clarify roles and expectations. So who has the authority to exercise their discretion and act upon their preference? For you in your own life, you do. You have that right. How do we know? God has given that to you. Jesus said, Lord, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against. Well, if you're not important, then there's nothing to trespass. If it's public property, that in a way is what's such a travesty about prostitution. Now, I've hung a sharp right, but it's very important. Nobody has the right to treat someone else sexually as a common object. It's dehumanizing. And those that tout this, sex work idea, as real work, no, they're not talking about the women that are having to be subjected to all that. Okay, who has the right to grant permission? Okay, coming back to the issue of boundaries. So that also means you have the right to say no. So who has the right to say no or no further? And that's enough. You do. God has given you that. So you have authority over your own life. As far as your own opinions and preferences, those are part of you. As a parent, you have authority to tell someone no further when it comes to your kid. Okay, so boundaries are very important. They separate and they demarcate things that are important. And they make the invisible visible. You are important because God says you are. And because of that, now we have things such as thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not trespass, thou shalt not commit adultery, meaning stealing the most important thing to you. Okay? There are two kinds of boundaries. Now that you know that boundaries are important and you have the right to have them, what are the kinds of boundaries? There are two kinds. One is, let me see if I can do this here. One is going to be what is called structural and functional boundaries. Now, let me see if I can bring my little face up here. I'm still learning how to do this. Okay, so when we're talking about, there I am. I'm getting so high tech. Thank you very much. Okay, so when you think about boundaries, the first is really what God has put in place. Okay, now this is going to have to do with kind of how we operate, how society operates. So the first and most important aspect of boundaries is really you and your relationship with God. And no one else really should encroach upon that. Okay, and no one can. We can permit them to do that, but there always needs to be a part of me, even when I'm married, even when I have kids, that I need to be able to maintain my relationship with God. So me and God are in the center. The next closest sphere, as it were, as you see, kind of like a concentric circle from dropping a rock in a pond. Okay, the next concentric circle, as far as functional and structural boundaries, would be husband and wife. So if you have a husband and wife that's actually making you give up your relationship with God, then they are encroaching upon that, and you're actually running the risk then of having an idol. It's kind of interesting. So if your husband or wife are requiring you to give up your relationship with God, then that's a problem. Okay, so husband and wife are the next sacred kind of space in that concentric circle. The next would be your relationship with your kids. Now, look at the green. Look at the green one. The extended families and in-laws. Folks, when we get these inverted things or out of order, problems are going to happen. The reason why the issue of in-laws can be so tricky is why? Because if in-laws or extended family try to encroach upon those other circles, there's going to be problems. Okay, so we need to make sure that extended family does not encroach upon your relationship with your kids and your relationship with your spouse. You are to leave and cleave. So there's a husband and wife relationship, and your relationship with your kids is sacred. If you have in-laws, if you have parents that are trying to cut in on that relationship, they are transgressing, and you need to have boundaries. Okay? You have close friends, that'll be probably in that same bandwidth. The next, I had a church. Some of you go to church, some don't, but if you have a church and church family, it's probably going to be right kind of next to really good friends, or close friends and extended family. And then friends, so there's differentiation of the kinds of friends. And then you'll have casual acquaintances, and then I put polite society. It's kind of in that order. Now, let me see where I went. Okay, so you can see then that there are varying degrees of influence as far as who's permitted into the inner circle. Now, that's structural and functional. That's different than, in a way, what we're talking about when it comes to personal boundaries. Now, it also applies to husband and wife, and then parents, and then in-laws. So those are called personal boundaries as well. When the state tries to encroach, it's encroaching into very personal boundaries, and it should not. Okay, but where we will really get messed up, and what underlies a lot of the counseling issues, is not so much, but it is when those get when in-laws try to be the parents, or when they're coming in between the parents and the child. Okay, there needs to have boundaries with that. Things will not work well. So a lot of people are not then speaking to that issue for fear of, but we need to leave and cleave. But in terms of setting boundaries with one another, there's some overlap now, but we're going to make a shift to the relational and personal. If these get mixed up in terms of where they are on a continuum, then I will find that I will either allow those that shouldn't have access to more of me and my heart, and those things are important, allow those that haven't earned that right to encroach. There's a big difference between forgiveness, by the way. Forgiveness is granted when when the person has met the right requirements, meaning broken and contrite. So forgiveness is granted, but intimacy is earned. Okay, so boundaries when it comes to interpersonal relationships, they're granted to you by God and extended for your personal fulfillment and growth and relational connection. These are meant to keep you safe. They're implemented and maintained by your intuition. And that's why it's so important to have your intuition. Because what we're going to see now is, now notice the colors, kind of gradations here. We're going to use that same idea as I bring up that chart. Now, what do we have here? Oh, no, I'm sorry. Okay. You see, the one is on the outside there. There we go. I'm going to cover up the one. Okay. So personal boundaries have to do with degrees of intimacy, connection, value, respect, and appreciation. Unfortunately, most of us have been taught that it's pretty much either or. Either we have a relationship or we don't. That's not true whatsoever. There are gradations of these relationships. 10, and you could flip-flop the numbers, but on a scale of 1 to 10, in this case, I've chosen 10 as being the most intimate, meaning the closest to you, the closest to your heart. There are concentric circles from casual, from a level 1, all the way to a 10. And incrementally, people have to earn the right to move slowly in toward the center. And this is 100% your right. You never have to justify why someone is at whatever number, but you are fully in control of that. But a selfish person will do what? They won't want you to know about this. And so they will try to tell you it's all just one color, right? That they have the right to come in your life and then they have the right to take over. That is not true. Okay, so these boundaries are implemented and maintained by your intuition, are meant to reflect reality in terms of the other person's character qualities. And that's what boundaries reflect. Boundaries reflect an increasing degree of trust, an increasing degree of appreciation. We could keep going. Based upon how the other person has conducted him or herself and the extent to which they value you, respect you, and appreciate you. And if you allow someone in one of the closer concentric circles who has not earned that right, they will wreak havoc on you, and you will bear the consequences, and they will walk away with the goods, so to speak. So, for instance, if you have a parent who has treated you poorly, yet wants full access to every part of you, including your schedule, including your preferences, as far as, let's say, giving up your holidays or giving up your goals and your dreams, then they will be granted access to that which they haven't earned the right. Okay, so these kind of boundaries are meant to reflect reality in terms of the other person's character qualities, and this is why we should be more concerned. As a matter of fact, I wanted to share this. This is why we should be concerned about the trans movement and other kinds of people that minimize the issue of sexual intimacy, and they turn it into recreational sex. There's a lot of studies that have been done as far as human relationships, moral development, emotional development. And what happens is this. If you take a level 1 relationship, how about a hookup? You go to a bar or you're online and you meet someone, so you know nothing about this person. So I'm going to remove my little picture here just for a second. Okay, so that would be a 1. Okay, if you know nothing about someone, they are a 1. Okay, if you end up going to bed with them, what number is that? That's a 10. If it's no longer a 10, then something's happened to your soul, to your heart of hearts. You become emotionally damaged. And so what are we telling kids now? We've given them the idea that there's nothing to sex. And so they can hop in and out. As a matter of fact, now we're going to add what? We're going to add deviance to that. We're going to add abuse to that. We're going to add BDSM stuff. So there are a lot of studies as far as emotional development that says there needs to be, in order to become a whole person and be able to have a complete and a healthy relationship, there's a progression that actually corresponds with each of those numbers, such as you meet someone and then you get to know them. That's a number 2. And then maybe number 3 is going out for coffee. Number 4, that's starting to date. Number 5 may be the beginning of holding hands. Number 6, that could be hugging. I don't know, but again, 5 and 6, now you're starting to get closer. Eventually, what's also, here's an interesting thing. Here's the progression, by the way, of the physical, how it should go. So once somebody has gotten emotionally close to someone, eventually, and the first thing will be holding hands, so hand to hand, and then hand to shoulder, then hand to waist. It's getting a little more intimate. This one's interesting. Hand to head. You just don't let anybody touch your head. That's usually reserved for more intimate types of relationships. What number would that be put at? As I'm looking at the chart here, that should be, now we're into about a 7. We're getting close. But what are we telling kids these days? So my concern with the trans movement, or anybody that would tell anyone of age, but especially the younger the age, the more you're going to do significant damage to these kids, is what? If you treat sex and sexuality as nothing, and you bypass all these gradations of intimacy, then you will have kids that have no ability to meaningfully connect and will be damaged. And they'll be a shell of themselves just waiting for a predator. And so they will be used and abused. So when it comes to friendships, when it comes to intimacy, what happens is If I've experienced damage, then I won't know that there are these gradations. And so I will end up fast-tracking the process when it shouldn't be fast-tracked, meaning this. I will go from level 1 to level 10 very, very quickly. And that is a recipe for disaster because I haven't had an opportunity to discern. So what happens if I do that? Well, we're going to use the same, We're going to use the same pictures as far as the color designation. And let's say we want to have a 10 relationship with someone. If I assume they are at a 10, but what happens if they're at a 2? But if I assume they're at a 10 when they're at a 2, we have a disparity here. And we're going to go into much more detail next time. But what happens is this. I will approach the person as though they are at a 2, at a 10. They want to be at a 10, and they can respect and reciprocate at a 10. But what happens if they're not at a 10, and if I don't know there's a gradation, because really I should be starting at a 1 or a 2 with this person, but I'm already at a 10, the person may take advantage physically, but what's going to happen? It's going to end up where I am wanting something from them that they are not ready to give, can't give, or won't give. And so the longer the relationship goes on, they're feeling okay, yet what am I starting to feel? I'm starting to feel agitated. So the longer I'm with them, I'm giving at a level 10, they're giving at a level what? They're giving at a level 2. And I walk away frustrated, but while I'm with them, how do I start to feel in terms of my anxiety? Let me disappear here for a second. Now I've got a lot of anxiety going on. So think about the holidays when you're with people that you wish you could connect with. You want things to be different, but you walk away frustrated. Why? What happens? Because you're trying to connect with people that are nowhere near where you are, and you're asking of them, you're presuming that they can meet you where you're at, and they don't actually intend to, and therefore they can't. We're going to continue. There we are. We're going to continue developing this to help you understand why you find yourself anxious and frustrated around certain people, because that is the making of what we call a love-hate relationship. And there's an answer to that. And we will look at that next time on Journey to Healing.
You've been listening to Journey to Healing, sponsored by SurvivorSupport.net. We trust you've been helped by the information our host, John Euler, has shared. To donate to this ministry, schedule a personal consultation with John, or to arrange a professional training for your church or organization with John, simply visit our website. On behalf of Survivor Support, we look forward to hearing from you and to have you join us next time on Journey to Healing.